Hi everyone, this is Shauna Teresa, RAYAC Executive Officer, and this is my desk. In this monthly video blog, I go over questions that are coming across my desk every single day so we can have much smoother real estate transactions here in York and Adams counties. And the question that I have today is one that I've gotten a little frequently recently. So not sure the reason for the uptick, but I thought it would be a good opportunity to just share some information back with everyone to make sure everybody's on the same page. So the question is, do I need to disclose a psychological stigma that occurred on the property? So before I get into the answer to that question, as I like to normally do, is give you my disclosures, as I am not an attorney and I do not play one in TV, so this is not legal advice, but I do have a link to the article in this video that was written by Jim Goldsmith, who was the general counsel for the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors about this exact topic. So, what if there is a horrid event that occurs on the property, whether that be a murder or a suicide or some other type of psychological activity that may have occurred on the property? Do you need to disclose that in Pennsylvania when you are selling your home? And the answer to that question is no. There was a Supreme Court case that made this decision in 2014, and they determined that this psychological stigma is not considered a material defect on the property, and therefore it does not need to legally be disclosed when you are selling the home. So I know that leaves a bunch of other questions for you. So if you are the listing agent, and you are aware, or the seller makes you aware, that there was some type of event that happened on the property, like a suicide, and you need to have a conversation with your clients. You can inform them that legally they do not have to disclose that the suicide occurred on the property, but it may be something they want to consider disclosing, even though legally they don't have to. So the decision is up to the seller whether or not they would like to disclose that activity that occurred on the property. You know, at the end of the day, the buyers will most likely find out that something occurred on the property. And in the event that they do find out, even though it's not legally required that they needed to disclose that, could that potentially cause problems with the transactions later on, or could potentially the buyer get upset and say that you as a real estate licensee were trying to keep something from them? So what do you as a listing agent, what are your responsibilities? Well, number one is you need to have that conversation with your seller if you are aware that there was a psychological stigma that occurred on the property, and how the seller would like you to address it, whether or not they are going to decide that they are going to disclose it voluntarily in the seller's property disclosure statement. But you also need to find out what you are supposed to do if asked. So you need to take the direction from the seller. Now, you can't lie if you're asked if there was any type of psychological stigma on the property. So you can't lie if you know that there was. But if the seller tells you they don't want you to disclose it, your answer to that question, if directly asked, would then have to be, I'm not at liberty to answer that question. And most likely, if a buyer were to ask that question, you know, if I were a buyer and I were to ask that question and the listing agent said to me, I'm not at liberty to disclose the answer to that question, I'm going to think in my head, okay, the answer's yes. So have the conversation with your seller, determine what direction they would like to go in, but make sure at all times that you are never lying to any of the prospective parties. It's never okay to lie to one party. What about you as a buyer's agent? What are your responsibilities here? So if the buyer makes a comment to you that says, hey, you know what, I could never live in a property where a murder occurred. So now you as a buyer's agent, that puts you on notice, because you know that it is not legally required for any of the sellers to disclose that there was a psychological stigma on the property. So you as a buyer's agent now, you know, should take an additional responsibility here on behalf of your clients to say, okay, we know that they're not legally required to disclose it. So if this is important to you, this is a question that we are going to have to ask to each of these properties that you might be interested in writing a contract on, whether or not a psychological stigma occurred on the property, and get the answer. And again, the listing agent if known to them, has to take the direction from their client over how they're going to respond, whether with no, there is no psychological stigma that did in fact occur, or yes, if it did occur and the seller said, okay, if you're asked, you're free to disclose that information, or if it, yes, the psychological stigma occurred on the property, but the seller doesn't want you to disclose it, you hear the answer of, I'm not at liberty to say. So again, you as a buyer's agent, this is a conversation you may want to have with your clients if you know that they have expressed that purchasing a property with a psychological stigma on it is of a concern to them and they do not want to live in a home in which that occurred on. So you as the agents, make sure you're having these conversations with your clients. Make sure you're following the letter of the law here. And always the advice is you can never, ever lie to a client. And if the answer is, I don't know, that's the answer. I don't know if you're asked that question because the seller hasn't mentioned anything to me and I didn't ask him that question. So I hope that information was helpful to you. I'm going to put a link in the video to the article that was written by Jim Goldsmith. And as always, if you ever have any other topics or questions you'd like to cover in this video blog, please reach out to me because my doors and ears are always open to you. Thanks so much and have a wonderful day.